Alrighty, folks. So we've had a question about women in Islam. So um, this is one of the issues that is much more complicated than the media would have you think. There were tons of goddesses in Saudi Arabia when Muhammad um, began preaching and converting. And like lots of places with goddesses, there's not a particular one-to-one where having a goddess means that actual women get treated better. But there's always something to be said for representation. Right? Okay. Anyway, so stamping out polytheism of all sorts was Muhammad's mission. Right? He was such a hardcore monotheist that he thought that Christians were not monotheists because they had a trinity. He was like, no, that's three people. That's not one, that's three, and that makes you a polytheist. So hence my thinking that he actually was much closer to Judaism than Christianity. Okay, anyway, I digress. So Muhammad's first wife, her name was Khadijah, and she was older than him, very wealthy, and his boss, like literally his boss. So Muhammad did not have a problem with powerful women. Uh, when he goes to the cave where the, angel Gabriel wakes him up, right? It's the middle of the day, it's hot, he's having a nice nap in the cave, and Gabriel comes to him and he's like, recite! And he's like, ah! Which is the only sensible, response to being woken up by a big scary angel in the middle of your nap in a cave. Right? Only sensible response. So he goes home and he says to his wife, this terrible thing happened to me today. And Khadijah says, Allah would not, do you a bad turn. So she's the one who really puts him on the path of being a prophet. And her uncle, who's a Christian, is literate, right? Muslims make a lot about the, at least claim, that Muhammad couldn't write at all. So apparently, I don't read a word of Arabic, but apparently the Quran is like crazy beautiful Arabic, and you have to be like a real scholar of the language to be able to read it. Whereas you can, like, normal people can read a newspaper, but they might not be able to read, like, okay. Anyway, so the idea that Muhammad couldn't read or write, and yet this book is so beautiful, right? Supports, right, the idea that it comes straight from Allah, right? But it goes through Khadijah's uncle. He's the one who starts transcribing it. All right, so Khadijah. Number two, Khadijah dies at some point, and at that point, Muhammad is, like the prophet, and he um, has lots of wives. And just a sweet little story. His favorite, her name was Aisha, or Aisha, depending on where you live. And he would spend a night with each of his wives, and when he was dying, he waited to die until it was her night so he could be with her. I've had students who've never heard of people waiting to die, but I've seen it. It's a real thing. You can wait to die until someone you really want to see shows up. Okay, so that's very sweet. But then Aisha, right, then there's this big conflict about succession and who's going to take over now that Muhammad has died. And Aisha gets on a horse and she goes fighting, right? She becomes a general. So the current controversy about, veiling and whether veiling is sexist or not doesn't really come from Muhammad's time. And in fact, there's nothing in the Quran about veiling. The story is, the real story. So one of his marriages, it's a big party, right? Everybody comes over, and Muhammad can't get rid of his wedding guests. And he says, so his bride is like over here, and he says, well, I'm going to draw a curtain around the bride, which means get out of here, people, right? Party's over, right? It's time for the honeymoon to begin. Ahem. And that is where people get the argument for veiling. I'm going to draw a curtain around the bride, um, which in context is literally just party pooping. Yeah. Um, so yeah, so veiling is really a hot and heavy subject, and there are a lot of women who, do the whole deal in the burqa, and they're like, I, you know, you go on the street, you Western women, and people just ogle you, right? Whereas they're not objectifying me, they can't see me, so they have to talk to me. So this is really a big debate right now. France, for example, recently said no veils in school. Can't do that. And then people are like, whoa. So yeah, so that's it's a very complicated topic. Um, I've had students at Adelphi who cover their head, right? And I had one last year, I guess, who whose family was like, "Oh, please don't do that because she was Pakistani. It's going to be dangerous. It's going to be dangerous for you." And it wasn't that it had nothing to do with religion. There's like, if you do that, because she's the only woman in her family who does, um, you're going to get threatened. And they were right. She did get threatened, and she just covers her head. It's uh, so yeah, a very it's a very fraught subject, but it was Muhammad had nothing to do with it. It was everybody later.